This is Bob Andelman, and this is the Mr. Media Interview, recorded live on blogtalkradio.com on December 14th, 2007. Brian Frazer's life reads far more colorfully than mine would, I'm afraid. On the other hand, I managed to avoid that whole compulsive gambling, bodybuilding, speed eating, colon cleansing, Kabbalah thing that afflicted his youth. In his first book, Hyper-Chondriac, Frazer comes clean. Did I just say that? About a life lived at super speed. It is one he spent most of his years in search of medical solutions to a litany of physical ailments, when it turned out most of the trouble was in his head. Brian, welcome to Mr. Media.
Thank you, Mr. Media. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you being here. And I got to start with the most dangerous question of all. How you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good, actually. I am very fortunate that I found out I had a problem, because otherwise I'd probably be dead by now.
And, has your life settled down? Are you into a more comfortable routine now?
Yeah, well, the first part about settling down is realizing that I had a problem, because basically, and you know because you've read the book, but I'll tell your listeners, 3 months before my wedding, my hands were itching furiously, so a friend referred me to his dermatologist, and I expected to walk out with, some cortisone cream. And instead, within 45 seconds, a 60-year-old guy said that I was the most high-strung, uptight, intense person he'd ever met, and he wrote me a prescription for Zoloft. And I was like, Zoloft? I'm not depressed. I have a lot of other problems, but I'm certainly not depressed. And I refused to take the Zoloft for a few weeks, and then finally I said, you know what, I'm going to take it. And it changed my life within a week. I realized that, like, all of my problems, all of my rage. I mean, every once in a while, sure, it's somebody else, but for the most part, it's me. You know what I mean? It's like I'm not in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's just my energy attracts other bad energy, and my rage is, you have to let things slide. So until that happened, which was 4 or 5 years ago, I didn't even realize. I thought everybody else was a jerk and not me, and that made me realize that I was a jerk. And then I wanted to get off of the Zoloft, so I've branched out and looked through some alternative therapies.
How much of your energy today, Brian, is devoted to staying calm, or do you feel that you've had it under control for a while?
I don't think it's ever under control. I mean, you have to work at it. I don't think it's it's like if one was an alcoholic, it's a day at a time. So you never know what's going to happen in life, and you have to just prepare yourself. So if I keep my diet squeaky clean, and by squeaky clean, my diet was always good before. I mean, I would have like a banana and a soy yogurt in the morning. But I went to an Ayurvedist, which I found to be the most helpful thing available. And that's another thing about the book, that there's no stunt journalism in this. And this is my life, and the book's been out for almost a year now, and I still continue to go to, new things, anything that I think will help me. But the Ayurvedist, who basically puts his thumb on you for, and measures your pulse and your 7 different layers of energy, said that, the foods I'm eating are healthy, but they're not healthy for my body type, and that I actually had to eat foods with less sugar and more fat. And that has helped me tremendously. If I would stay on an Ayurvedic diet 100% of the time, which is hard to, especially if you're traveling, I'd never have to take another pill in my life.
Wow.
Like making mung bean soup and these things that you wouldn't even, I just smashed a coconut in my driveway this morning, which I do once a week. And I have coconut and almonds and, mango puree I make. And nothing that I do, I don't cook, so nothing I make is all that scientific or complicated. But like the mung bean soup has changed my life. I know it sounds really stupid, but it's I don't know what's in it, and might not change your life or anybody else's, but it'll work for somebody else out there depending on their energy level.
Well, let's come back to the food, because I think the food comes in at the end of the story. So let's go back to the beginning a little bit. And I have to tell you, I can't remember many books, many memoir type books that I've read and felt guilty for laughing during. But I'm guessing you won't take offense at hearing that.
No, not at all. I mean, my life is certainly, I've had problems, family problems as most people do. But I mean, my life is neither comedy nor tragedy. It's a little bit of both. So, it's not so bad. There's a lot of people that have had a lot less and a lot worse lives than I have.
Well, one of the things, Brian, that struck me as I was reading was that as much as you seem to hate being noticed for all the quirks that made you stand out as a kid, you nonetheless wrote a catalog of them. Did you have second thoughts about putting all this in a book and opening yourself up?
No, because I mean, it's a couple of people that I've known for years that read the book, and then I sat across the street from. In fact, even my publicist who set this up said, "Doesn't it make you awkward to know that now I know all this stuff about you?" I'm like, "No, I didn't kill a person. I didn't really harm anybody but myself all these years." And there's still some difficulties with my mother obviously still has not gotten over the book, and she's sensitive to begin with, but I talk to her 3 times a week for 25 years, and now she's not speaking to me. But I wouldn't go back and change anything. I mean, if you're going to be honest, you have to be honest about everybody, not just yourself. You have to kind of take everybody down with you.
Well, let's start with your mother. I was going to say let's talk about some of the issues from your youth, and we can start with your mom. I mean, one of the things that comes across is the reader may read into this that you get a ways into the book and you think maybe he's blaming his Jewish mother with the MS for some of his trouble, but I don't really think that's what you had in mind.
No, not at all. I in fact, if anything, the only thing I blame her for is present day, in that there's not a solution to every problem, but there's a partial solution to every problem, and I don't know if she's really explored all of her options. And I've tried to get her to take Zoloft or Paxil or something like that, and allegedly she was on it for like a week years ago, and it was a great week according to my father. And she just refuses to do that. And it's not like she's pill-averse. She probably takes 30 pills a day. And, she almost wants to be a martyr, and she refuses to try and make things a little bit easier on herself. But no, I mean, I love my mother, I love my parents. I dedicated the book to them, so there's certainly no malice there. But I think that a lot of the book centers around pain, because even though MS is not contagious, the symptoms certainly are, and disease and pain are contagious. So I think that a lot of her pain has filtered down to me, and I've tried to compensate in other ways. As you told your listeners at the beginning, I was a former bodybuilder, natural, no steroid-free, for about 10 or 12 years, and in an attempt to kind of insulate and protect my body so nothing horrible would happen to it, as occurred to my mother.
Does your mother object, or does she feel that there was an invasion of her privacy being written about in such detail?
Yes, I think, and again, I'm not really talking, she's not really speaking to me, but you have to also realize that she has been retired for years, and as has my father. They don't go out, they're basically confined to their house. They go out to eat for lunch at 11 o'clock, maybe once a month, and that's it. Had they had to face coworkers every day, I may have thought otherwise, and I may have thought that I was stepping over the line, but, nobody's going to know anything about them. And the people that know her already know that, the difficulties that are that come with disease.
Well, if it's not your mother that contributed necessarily to some of the problems you've had over the years, could it be the father collecting the comic books? Because I know as an old comic book guy myself, it's been blamed for all kinds of things.
I don't think my father's comic book, if anything, it could only be blamed in that my father hasn't been. If he would have emulated, and both of my parents are still alive, if he had emulated a superhero a little bit more, then maybe the relationship with my mother and everybody else would be better. Because the problem is my mother's a little bit too mean and my father's a little bit too nice. So if my father became a little bit meaner and had more of a backbone, then my mother would realize that she couldn't get away with everything that she's getting away with, and then, things would kind of move back towards the center a little bit.
Mm. And it was interesting to me. I have to say that I connected to your description of struggling with your bar mitzvah. It was a hellacious time in my life too. But the shocking thing there was that your rabbi very shortly after your bar mitzvah converted to Episcopalian, and that seemed to really have an effect on you. And of course, it's a recurring theme later in the book. Was that? As you look at that now, was that really a big deal in your life?
Yeah. In fact, I just went to my high school graduation. Boy, that would be something. It took me 25 years to graduate. I went to my high school reunion, actually just October, and there were 2 or 3 other people that were there that I hadn't seen in years that also went to my temple and that had read the book and were commenting about the rabbi. Yeah, it's kind of it happened about 2 months after he bar mitzvahed me, and it's kind of weird to have somebody, kind of getting you through the rituals of becoming a Jewish man, and then like 2 months later he splits to Woonsocket, Rhode Island, and he's converted. So it's a little odd.
Does it still bother you today?
Yeah, I still have an aversion. I flipped out for a while. The Zoloft has calmed down my religious aversion, but I can't really go into any house of worship, whether it's a Buddhist, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, it doesn't matter. I tend to show up for weddings late because the ceremonies kind of freak me out. So a lot of that is probably attributable to my rabbi or ex-rabbi.
Now, for me, it was always I'd go to those things and I just fall asleep in them, which grates on my wife terribly. I'm just like, she's like, giving me the elbow because I'm asleep. So it's a different kind of aversion, but
every once in a while there's like a really long one. Like I went to a Catholic one with my wife, and I always make a go of it and sit in the very, very back row, and just because I don't want to disrupt anything and see how long I can take it. And it was literally, the ceremony was an hour and a half, and I'm like, what? This is crazy. Where are the appetizers? An hour and a half?
Yeah, all that time with no food.
Exactly.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, we may have some people who'd like to ask you about the book or some of the issues related to the book. Let me give out the number, folks. If you'd like to call in and talk to Brian, it is 646-595-3135. It's 646-595-3135. Brian, at what age did you realize that not everyone was like you?
Probably 38 or 39, to be honest.
Really?
Oh yeah. I just kind of just went through life and didn't think about it too much. I thought that people weren't like me in that I was polite and they were rude, which is where a lot of the rage comes from. But that's certainly not true. But yeah, it took a long time. And had I not stumbled onto this dermatologist, and like I said, I don't know why a dermatologist is dispensing, Zoloft. I don't know if I would ever have realized that I had a problem. So
one of the things, you go through. Did you ever count up how many doctors and therapists and quacks that you went through in the course of this?
No, I still go to some weird things. I went to this thing called radiology recently after the book, which just shows that it's not stunt journalism, where they kind of measure energy and they see if you're getting the right minerals and supplements, and they also ask you questions, and it's kind of odd, but I got something out of it, so that's all I can ask. No, I've gone to a lot of them. I've also experienced a bevy of illnesses. I had, my colon hemorrhaged at 25, and I had, hepatitis A at like 31, and I had prostate problems, and it was all induced by stress because I have never been a big drinker, never done a drug in my life, have been exercising 5 or 6 days a week since I was 14. So all the stress has just, has built up in my body and has contributed to these diseases, which is why I'm 43 and I'm much healthier now than I was when I was 23. So, which is unusual.
And and for someone who may just be tuning in now, and you kind of did this at the top, how would you describe in a sentence or two what you ultimately decided was the problem?
The problem was basically me. I have so much rage, and I always blamed it on other people, but I realized that it's not a coincidence that there's always a problem when I'm around. So the Zoloft kind of elevated me up into the heavens, and it allowed me to look down and observe myself and observe my behavior, and it wasn't as exemplary as I had once thought. And the title of the book also is, a lot of people confuse hypochondriac with the title of my book, which is Hyper-Chondriac. And basically a hypochondriac, all of my diseases are real. A hypochondriac thinks that they're sick, they go to the doctor, but they're not really sick, they don't find anything. I think I'm sick, I go to the doctor, they find a lot of stuff, but it's all created within. And it's also on my website, Hyper-Chondriac.com, also explains a lot.
Okay. And there's a point at the book where I started wondering, how did this guy, and some of the details of the book, you did the bodybuilding for 10, 12 years, you did stand-up, you were a stand-up comedian. At about the point that you started doing stand-up, I was thinking to myself, okay, he's in college, but I'm not getting any indication here how this guy is ever going to wind up as a writer at the end of the story, and then this kind of twist of fate in college put you up in front of a class doing material. Which career is more psychically damaging, stand-up comedy or bodybuilding?
I think bodybuilding you can control because it's not really an audience. I mean, there is an audience when you compete, but they're not going to heckle you and say, "Hey, bad abs," So, and you can control if you work hard at bodybuilding, and you eat right and you train hard. And you have some genetics, you'll turn out okay. Whereas stand-up, you just never know what's going to happen. Even if you're prepared, sometimes I've gone up and gotten huge laughs, even though I know that my rhythm and everything's a little off, which upsets me because I haven't done my job, even though I've made people laugh. And then other times, everything's perfect and the lines are delivered perfectly and not a peep and heckling, and it's a disaster. So, yeah, stand-up is very, very, very difficult, and had I not gotten into it so early, I would have had more to think about. But because it happened so accidentally, I didn't really, it's like being pushed in the water. I didn't realize how insane it was.
And have you found in the years since the book came out that there is a community of people like you that you didn't know about before, or were you already finding each other at that point?
No, I didn't find anybody until through MySpace and Facebook and the Hyper-Chondriac.com, because there's a web address at the back of the book. I've had all sorts of people, and the odd thing is, and maybe it's because women seem to buy more books, but I would say 60 or 70% of the respondents, even on Amazon, have been like women, and the rage in the women. And I had originally thought it was more of a very male book, but the response from women, and not women who are with angry men. These are angry women on their own who have rage. So that has surprised me, because I thought it would be like 2/3 men and 1/3 women, and it's been just the opposite.
And I was going to ask you, what do you follow this book with? Do you go in another direction? I haven't met anyone who's written a book who hasn't been thinking about another book. And kind of wondering, do you write about more health issues? Are you thinking about going in another direction? Have you already done another book?
In fact, I just handed the proposal in today. It's basically about not having children. So it's also nonfiction, but it's about not having children and being fine with it. And my wife and I have been married for coming up on 6 years, and we're fine.
And that's not stunt journalism either, right?
No, that's not journalism. No, I don't. No, it's not like I'm only going to date people named Laura for a year. No, everything.
I have this strong sense that you keep referring to stunt journalism. I have this feeling of A.J. Jacobs coming up in conversation.
Oh no, not at all, not at all. He's actually, I actually know him well, so it wasn't. It's certainly not, and he's a great guy. It's certainly not aimed towards him. It's just, all the stuff I've been reading in Newsweek and Time and stuff like that kind of, is poking fun at the stunt journalism. But I don't recall reading his name in that, so that's certainly not the case. But no, I've just gotten questions on shows before about, people think that I tried that this book is a gimmick, which it's not. So I'm referring to myself and not to anybody else, really.
Yeah, I have to say I've never read anything like this. I mean, every page. I mean, to a certain point in the book, it seems like every page there's just something that makes you go, "Oh, this poor guy," and then at the same time you present it in a way that it's funny, and that's why I said earlier I felt a little guilty for laughing at times.
No, you shouldn't feel guilty for laughing. Yeah, no, I didn't want to make it too jokey, but I also didn't want to make it too serious because that's that's a recipe. If anything's too serious like this, then people feel bad for you.
I guess one of the big turning points in your life was when you got the gig writing for the TV show Blind Date, which is, I guess, where you met your future wife, Nancy. Is that right?
That's right. And again, another accidental thing that happened in that I was writing on another show, and the person that I was writing with in the conference room was turning on this new show called Blind Date, and it had just been on the air for like a week, and it looked really fun. So I went home, and I didn't have an agent, and I froze the credits. This is back in the days of VCR only. I froze the credits. I wrote everybody's name down, and I didn't have an agent, and I just kept calling different people, and I befriended the secretary at Blind Date, and she told me who to speak with, and I wound up snaking myself in and getting an interview there, and then I did a sample date, and I wound up working there. So it's, again, just an accidental thing. But, yeah, that's where I met Nancy. We wrote Thought Bubbles, and we kept it a secret from everybody for a year.
Well, one of my secrets is that I actually watched that show, and I always find it funny that there was that, and I think there was another show called The Fifth Wheel. Oh, The Fifth Wheel, same company, yeah, which I hated The Fifth Wheel because every single person on the show, there's basically 5 people. All the guys, there's like 3 guys and 2 women, or 3 women and 2 guys. All the guys wore the same outfit, and they looked the same. And I actually called the producers one day and said, why don't you assign one guy to wear the red shirt, or one guy wears black? I mean, everybody dressed in black all the time, and it was just a massive confusion watching that show. Well, so I want you to take me behind the scenes of Blind Date. Is the writing staff spending most of its time just cracking up at the people on the show? It seems like that's the fun of it. It's actually a very time-intensive job, if you can believe it. It's about 60 or 70 hours a week, 5 or 6 days a week. You have to cut down the date, and then it's more scientific than maybe it should be, but you have to cut down the date, then you have to write a script, then you have to meet with executives, and they approve your script, and then you go to a graphics department. So there's not as much laughing until the end of the week, because everybody has to hand in a date, like a finished date, every Friday. So Fridays were good, and there were a lot of laughs, but I'm not so sure that Monday through Thursday there were that many. What would be an example of some pop-ups that were memorable? I mean, if you were in the industry of writing for Blind Date, what were some memorable pop-ups? Oh God, it's been about 3 years. I couldn't answer that. But when Nancy and I got married, our rabbi was a big Blind Date fan, and he actually kept making thought bubble jokes throughout the wedding, which I thought was kind of odd. But at least he hasn't converted to Episcopalianism since, so that's good. And I think while I'm confessing to this, I also found Cheaters to be a guilty pleasure. I like that one too. I'd never seen that. I'd never seen it. It's a great title for a show. You got to watch it once. I thought of it, and I thought of it because I think we have an on-demand channel called Outrageous On Demand, and I saw that Cheaters, like an uncensored Cheaters was on there, and I thought, now that's something I could spend an hour with. I don't know. That's so funny. You get to be named Mr. Media because you watch pretty much anything. Yeah, absolutely. So what's, you know, as we kind of wind down here, you know, what are you doing today? You mentioned you turned in a book proposal. You know, how are you living off the book? Are you doing other things? And, you know, what's kind of ahead for you?
Oh, I write for a bunch of magazines. So I have a monthly column in Los Angeles Magazine. It's the back page. It's called Hollywoodland. I write for Esquire and ESPN magazines, occasionally Vanity Fair, and, you know, I just keep myself busy that way. And once in a while I do some TV stuff. So I keep myself pretty busy.
And I guess from the proposal, children are not in the future, but you know, what do you and Nancy have in your plans? What do you want to do the coming years?
We just like being creative people and being creatively stimulated and you know, taking care of ourselves, basically. A lot of times when people have children, they you know, they have to kind of put themselves on hold, and sometimes once the kids have left the nest, it's hard to, you know, pick up where you left off.
Mm.
So
that's true. There's no denying that.
How many do you have children?
I have one, and she is a great kid, and I love her to death. But I mean, there's definitely those days when you think, you know, I could be doing X instead I'm doing Y over here, and you know.
How old is your daughter?
On the other hand, I'm sorry?
How old is your daughter?
Oh, she's 11. And
okay.
I've told my wife, I've got it figured out. 6 years. She goes to college. The current dogs will be at the end of their span, and I get to sleep late again and do what I want.
Oh, the current dog. What kind of dogs do you have?
A yellow lab who's dumb as rocks, and then a terrier mix that can do a 6-foot vertical leap standing still.
Wow. How much does he weigh? I have a terrier mix also. That's another chapter in my book. My dog has actually really helped me calm down. So if people have a problem, you know, calming down, go to the pound and find the calmest dog you can find, which is what Nancy and I did. And he's been great for the last 4 years. So.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, animals are great, as long as you don't get the wrong animal, because sometimes, you know, you have to kind of complement your energy. Sometimes I see these older people get like these high-strung Jack Russells or something else like that, and it drives them crazy, and they can't keep up with them. So I had to.
This Labrador is like that. She is just, she's insane. And people tell me how wonderful their labs are and how calm and quiet. And mine is just an idiot. I mean, mine, you know, she begs and pleads and barks and drives you crazy to go out. You let her out, and 2 seconds later she's at the back door, and she's like, "What were you thinking? Why would you think I'd want to be out here in the great outdoors? I want to be in there with you." And then she comes in, and the whole routine starts over again. Not a calming effect.
Yeah, that's why we had to go. We had to go the. Although I'm a terrier mix nut now, so we'll probably stay in the terrier family for a while.
Yeah, the terriers are good. Well, Brian, I thank you so much for joining us on Mr. Media today. I really appreciate your time, and I've really enjoyed reading the book.
Thank you very much. And if anybody has any questions, they can go to Hyper-Chondriac.com, with or without a dash, Hyper-Chondriac.com, and they can contact me through there, and they can, you know, see a 2-minute animated book trailer that actually I made with the people from Blind Date. So they can contact me there and get more information on the book.
Great. Well, I appreciate you putting the time in on the show today. And if folks, pick up the book. You'll enjoy it. It's a lot of fun to read. And since you don't have to feel guilty about laughing at parts of it, I really encourage you to pick it up. Meanwhile, if you'd like to keep up with Mr. Media's Friday interviews, you can subscribe to the site via email at www.mrmedia.com. You can also subscribe to the feed via the podcast section of iTunes, or right here at blogtalkradio.com. And please come back again next week for another Fridays with Mr. Media.